The confrontation, Crockett versus Bezos. The air in the congressional hearing room was electric, thick with anticipation. More than 10 million Americans were watching this moment live, their collective gaze focused on the two figures at the center of the storm. On one side stood Jeff Bezos, the titan of tech, the architect of Amazon's global empire, his stance deliberately casual, his tailored suit impeccable. A subtle smile played at the corner of his mouth as he adjusted his tie, scanning the room with the cool detachment of a man who had faced scrutiny before and emerged unscathed each time. Opposite him was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, her eyes burning with quiet determination. As she stepped toward the podium, a hush fell over the room. This wasn't just another congressional hearing. It was a battlefield where the very soul of American democracy hung in the balance. "Mr. Bezos," Crockett began, her voice clear and unwavering. "Amazon faces serious accusations, not just as a marketplace, but as a weapon, manipulating the flow of information to further your own interests and influence political outcomes." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze locked with his. "The American people deserve to know, how do you justify using the immense power of Amazon to manipulate public opinion?" The question lingered in the air. For a fraction of a second, Bezos's composure cracked, a twitch at the corner of his eye, a subtle shift in his posture. But he recovered quickly, the mask of the unflappable CEO sliding back into place. "Let me make one thing perfectly clear," Bezos replied, his voice smooth as polished marble. "Amazon is a platform. We provide services to millions, offering a marketplace where people can buy and sell goods, where ideas and opinions can be shared freely. We do not interfere in political decisions. We simply give people the tools to make their own choices." His words were well-rehearsed, delivered with practiced precision. But beneath their surface lurked something colder, a challenge, perhaps, or a warning. His gaze swept across the room, briefly connecting with the conservative lawmakers who nodded their approval. Crockett felt the weight of their silent allegiance pressing down on her. These were the very people who could shield Amazon from accountability with the stroke of a pen. The injustice of it burned in her chest. "You speak of freedom and choice, Mr. Bezos," she continued, "but your understanding of those concepts seems selective." With deliberate movements, she slid a thick stack of documents across the table. The room fell silent as every eye tracked their path toward the committee. "These documents are internal Amazon records that have recently come to light," Crockett said, her voice cutting through the tension. "They reveal something disturbing, how Amazon has used its access to customer data to fund political campaigns. Campaigns that Amazon has directly influenced." Bezos stared at the papers, his breathing suddenly shallow. "This data, information that millions of Americans entrusted to you in good faith, has been sold to the highest bidder," Crockett continued. "It's been used not just for marketing, but to manipulate the very process by which we choose our leaders." A murmur rippled through the audience as the implications sank in. "Mr. Bezos, you betrayed the trust of millions. Your company didn't just provide a service. It sold their most personal information to political campaigns. And those campaigns didn't just use that data to sell products. They used it to sell power." Bezos shifted in his seat, but Crockett pressed on. "This isn't just a corporate scandal. This is a direct assault on the democratic process. You've used your platform to control the flow of information, to distort the truth, and to undermine the very foundation of our elections. And for what? For power? For profit." The tension in the room was unbearable. Bezos leaned back, gathering himself. "Let me be perfectly clear," he responded, frustration edging into his voice. "Amazon is a platform that serves millions every day. It connects buyers and sellers, creators and consumers. We do not engage in political interference. The allegations you've thrown at us are baseless, nothing more than an attempt to distort the nature of our work." He exhaled slowly, but there was a tightness in his jaw that betrayed his discomfort. "What you and others fail to understand," he continued, his voice hardening, "is that Amazon is built on principles of freedom, the freedom of people to access information, to buy and sell freely. You're a politician, congresswoman, and you can't possibly grasp the intricacies of running a business on this scale." His dismissal hung in the air, arrogant and cutting. The conservative members nodded approvingly, their expressions revealing their alliance with a billionaire's worldview. "I understand just fine, Mr. Bezos," Crockett responded, her voice even. I understand that your idea of freedom is about protecting your own wealth and power, not the people you've left behind. You call it business. I call it exploitation. The tension between them crackled like electricity. But before Bezos could respond, the door at the back of the room swung open. A man walked in, Thomas Mills, a former senior data analyst at Amazon. For years, he had been a quiet cog in Bezos's machine. Now, he stood before the committee, his face a mask of quiet resolve. I used to work for Amazon, Mills began simply, and in my time there, I witnessed things that I cannot stay silent about anymore. A hush fell over the room as Mills focused his gaze on Bezos. What you don't understand is that Amazon wasn't just collecting data on users. It wasn't just building algorithms to improve shopping. Amazon was using that data to manipulate public opinion, to influence political campaigns, to push a political agenda, and all of it was under the direction of Jeff Bezos. The room fell silent. Mills continued, his voice gaining strength. It wasn't just a few isolated incidents. Amazon actively used its massive data to target voters, to sway political outcomes, and yes, to manipulate elections. Amazon knew exactly what it was doing. Bezos knew exactly what it was doing. This wasn't a mistake. This was part of a carefully calculated strategy. Bezos's face paled, but his expression remained controlled. For the first time, Crockett saw a genuine crack in his armor. This wasn't just about business, Mills said, disgust evident in his voice. This was about power. You used Amazon not just to dominate the market, but to manipulate the political process, to shape the outcomes of elections, to protect your own interests. Mills turned to address the committee. The American people deserve better than this. They deserve transparency. They deserve a system that isn't controlled by corporations who can manipulate their way into power. The weight of his testimony hung in the air. Crockett seized a moment. Mr. Bezos, she said, rising to her feet, you spend this hearing pretending that Amazon is some neutral platform. But the reality is far different. You have used your immense power not just to innovate, but to manipulate for your own interests. And in doing so, you've hurt not only Amazon, but the very democratic principles this country was founded on. Bezos's fingers tapped rhythmically on the table, a tell of his growing unease. You've built an empire, yes, but at the expense of ethical values. The trust that millions place in Amazon has been violated, and in your pursuit of power, you've undermined the integrity of our political system. Her words stung like fire, cutting through the carefully crafted image Bezos had spent years building. This is not about free enterprise, Crockett pressed, her voice rising with conviction. This is about responsibility. This is about accountability. The American people put their trust in companies like yours, and you've abused that trust for personal gain. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. It's time for you to be held accountable. You have to answer to the people who trusted you. I'm not just asking for an apology. I'm demanding that you take responsibility. Bezos leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Let's be clear about one thing, Congresswoman, he responded coldly. I'm not the only one in this room with power. You want to talk about influence? Let's talk about the power you and your colleagues wield every day. He leaned back, his expression now dismissive rather than defensive. What you're asking for is the destruction of innovation. You want to take away our freedom, our ability to act. You want to control how we do business. And in doing so, you destroy the very thing that makes America what it is, a country of free enterprise, of personal liberty. He turned to Crockett, his lips curling slightly. You're a politician, Congresswoman. You don't understand the complexities of running a business at this scale. You've never had to make the hard decisions. You're too focused on your own narrow view, unable to see the bigger picture. His words were designed to belittle her, to push her back into her political corner. But Crockett wasn't backing down. Mr. Bezos, she said, her voice firm and unwavering, you spent this hearing defending your actions, claiming that Amazon operates within the law. But we know the truth now. Amazon, under your leadership, has manipulated the very political system this country relies on. She stood tall, her heart pounding but her mind clear. I am calling for an official investigation into Amazon's involvement in political manipulation. The American people deserve to know the truth, and they deserve to see justice served. The atmosphere shifted, a sense of gravity settling over the proceedings. This wasn't just about questioning Bezos anymore. It was challenging the system that had allowed him to operate with impunity. This is not just about you, Mr. Bezos, Crockett continued. This is about the millions who trusted Amazon with their personal data, with their privacy, and with their votes. This is about a system that has allowed corporate giants like you to manipulate the core of our democracy for your own benefit. She paused, letting her words sink in. You will be held accountable not just by this committee, but by the American people. And I will not stop until you are. The days following Crockett's call for action were a whirlwind of media coverage and public outrage. The sheer scale of the fallout from Bezos' actions had set off a firestorm, and now action was being taken. The tension was unbearable as a judge prepared to issue a ruling that would decide Amazon's fate. Crockett stood in the back of the courtroom, watching as the final decision was announced. In light of the evidence presented, the judge declared, Amazon is hereby ordered to pay a massive fine for its unlawful interference in the political process, its violation of privacy, and the ethical breaches it has committed. Furthermore, the company will undergo a complete restructuring, with new oversight measures to ensure such misconduct will not occur again. A ripple of shock moved through the room. The colossal fine was unprecedented, a signal that the justice system was willing to take a stand against the unchecked power of corporate giants. Bezos, sitting at the defendant's table, had grown visibly pale. For a moment, he seemed in disbelief, his eyes wide as the reality of the judgment settled in. For the first time in years, he looked like a man who had lost control. The ruling meant Bezos would no longer hold the same power he once did. His grip on Amazon, once unshakable, was now compromised. He would lose control of key projects, and a new board would oversee Amazon's operations. As the court session drew to a close, Crockett faced the media, her voice steady and resolute. This is just the beginning, she said, cutting through the noise. Amazon's punishment is only a small part of what needs to be done. This is about more than one company. This is about a system that has allowed corporations to exploit and manipulate the very foundation of our democracy. Her words echoed, a powerful call to action for anyone willing to listen. Today, we took a stand. But tomorrow, we fight to ensure that no corporation, no individual is above the law. As she walked out of the courtroom, shoulders squared with determination, Crockett knew her journey wasn't over. The battle for justice would continue, and she would be there, fighting for the justice that so many had been denied for too long. The victory had proven that one person's voice could make a difference in the face of overwhelming corporate power. It wasn't just about winning a legal case. It was about proving that the will of the people could overcome the grip of the powerful. The message had been sent. No one is above the law. And no matter how entrenched the system might seem, change is possible when someone has the courage to stand and fight. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell.